So it was rush hour, and Alan was on his train heading home. And while the train was moving painfully slow, and he realized he wasn't going to get home for a very, very long time, at this point in time, he didn't mind, because while he was on the train, he was getting to text with his daughter, Cecilia. And as they texted back and forth about how their days were going and what each one was up to, Alan asked his daughter if she was going to be around that night for dinner. And she said no, she wouldn't be home for dinner that night. She was going to be hanging out with Sean. And as soon as Alan saw that message and read it, his face flushed red. He grinded his teeth and he could feel the anger in his chest. And he was having this reaction because Alan absolutely hated Sean. He hated him from the first day he met him. And he absolutely did not like the fact that Sean was dating his daughter. He thought she could do much better, she deserved better, and she didn't see why she was wasting her time with him in the first place. And Alan had made his thoughts known to his daughter Cecilia on many occasions. But the more he seemed to tell her how much he didn't like Sean, the more she seemed to like Sean. And the stronger their relationship grew and the more serious it became. So under the advice of one of his co-workers, Joan, Alan decided he was going to try to approach things a little bit differently. And that was, instead of saying anything, he was going to say nothing. Joan told Alan, look, there is nothing you can say to her that's going to fix this problem. You simply have to step back and let her figure out for herself whether or not she's going to stay with this guy. The more you say, the worse it's going to get. Now, I use this example of Alan and this kind of regular and pretty normal problem to point out a much bigger and more serious matter that all of us face. And that is, all of us in our life are going to encounter problems that we just can't fix. And the more we work to fix them, the worse they seem to become. In fact, there seems to be no solution at hand except for us sort of just to step back and let go and see what happens. And it's to this conundrum that our gospel reading speaks today. It speaks to us about problems we can't fix. And I believe it holds out a nice message of hope for us to hear on this morning. So our gospel reading this week comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13. And this week's reading is a parable like last week's reading. It's a little bit different, though, in that this week's parable is only found in the Gospel of Matthew, where last week's parable was found in the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So this is a parable very unique to the Gospel of Matthew. And it's called the parable of the weeds. Or, if you remember from your childhood, it was also called the parable of the tares. Now, the story goes like this. There was a farmer who planted a wheat crop. And then at night, his enemy snuck into his house, into his field, and planted weeds among his wheat. And so as the wheat grew up, the weeds grew up as well. And it became obvious that someone had planted weeds among his wheat crop. So the farmer's employees noticed what was happening, and they came to him and asked what was going on. They said, "Didn't you use good seed? Why are weeds then growing in the field?" And the farmer replied to his employees, "This is happening because my enemy has come and has put weeds in my field." His employees said, "Well, do you want us to go and pluck up the weeds now, take care of this problem, and fix it?" And the farmer tells them no. He says that in removing the weeds, they will damage the wheat crop. And so what they should probably do is just let it be. And when it comes time to harvest the wheat, they will pull everything up together and separate the wheat and the weeds, and the wheat will be put in the barn, and the weeds will be burned. Now, this parable, like all Jesus' parables, have a deeper meaning. It's not just Jesus giving agrarian advice. And he explains the deeper meaning later in the chapter 13. And what he says is that in the parable, the farmer is Jesus. And the enemy is the evil one, the devil, the one who causes sin, injustice, and evil in this world. And the field is the world, and the wheat are the seeds of the children of God, and the weeds are the sin and evil that the devil puts into the world. Which makes a lot of sense, because often in our world, good and evil live side by side. It's a reality we all know and experience on a daily basis. Now, we in the story are the farmer's employees. And this is very important to remember, because we see the sin and the evil and the injustice in the world, and we want to fix it, naturally. And sometimes we can. A lot of times there's easy problems in the world that we can address and fix and take care of very quickly, and we should do that. But what about those problems we can't fix? What about those weeds that are so deeply rooted by the wheat that we can't do anything about this? And this is the larger message that Jesus is trying to get across to us. That ultimately, all those problems we can't fix with the world, He will fix at a certain time, when it's the right time and the right place. So, in this parable, I hope you hear a message of hope. Hope for people like me and you, hope for people like Alan, hope for anyone who's in this world who has a problem they can't fix, or sees things wrong with this world that they can't fix. Because what this parable tells us is that ultimately, justice will prevail. And this is a really important part of our Christian faith, that we believe and cling to the promise that in the end, justice will prevail. And the reason that we can cling and believe this promise is that because justice has already prevailed. Jesus, when He died on the cross, conquered sin and death. It no longer has any ramifications. It's just mainly a pest we have to put up with between this time and the time when Jesus returns. And today, as we come to celebrate Bryce's baptism, as St. Paul says, we are baptized into Jesus' death. So Bryce and all of us that are baptized are freed from sin and death. And it's not something we have to worry about, even though it's around us and we can't fix it how hard we try. For as St. Paul said in the reading that Judy said, we have a hope that Jesus will fix it. We can't see that hope, but a hope that you can't see is still okay to believe in. So, as you go about your life this week, and you face problems that you can't fix, problems in the world you see that wish would be corrected, remember the hope that we are given in this parable. And that is a hope that through Jesus, we know that justice will prevail. All the things that are wrong with this world will eventually be set right. The only problem is we're not going to be the ones who do them. That's Jesus' job. And that is the hope and faith we cling to. Amen.